Hey guys, and welcome back to another T-Pose development video. In this video I'll just be briefly going over the basic skills you need to get started in real-time visual effects. You just need to know a few fundamentals on a wide spread of things, but I'll just take you through each one step by step and perhaps give you some links as to where to start looking. I'm just going to be going over my expertise, which is more gameplay style effects, so if you're looking for more cinematic style, battlefield style effects, that's perhaps not my best expertise, but maybe I can do a video on that in the future and I can ask some of my friends that are perhaps more expert in this sort of field. As you noticed, perhaps I have this big circle thing now, so maybe I sound good. I don't know what it does, but it's good. It's mine. So I'm a YouTuber now, so that's pretty cool, I guess. Yeah. So I hope that's really useful. Let's get started, guys. Alright, if you want to get started in real-time effects, one of the most important things you're going to need to learn is the basic fundamentals of a 3D program. I'd recommend Maya at this point. Everybody seems to be picking it up in the industry, so it's probably the right place to go, and you can get a pretty cheap copy. In fact, I think you can get a student edition now. I believe that's actually what I've been using in my videos as of late. Hey, Autodesk, please don't send me to jail. That'd be good. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I recommend just picking that up at this point. Blender's another program that's looking pretty cool. Whatever, it doesn't matter. You just need to know a 3D program. You need to understand what UVs are, be able to model very basic shapes, and any additional tools like rigging or anything like that you learn inside of any 3D program, as long as you can export it to whatever engine you're using, then fantastic, just learn that. Any of those skills you learn are just going to be used in effects, no matter what. This is the cool thing about effects. Effects is very open. Like, this subject's amazing because you meet all different types of effects artists and they all got their own specialties and all different like weird programs, and then you kind of join together on a team and share knowledge, and it's great. So really anything you bring to the table is great, but you will need a very basic fundamentals in 3D, otherwise you are going to have a very hard time. Now, next you're going to need to learn some sort of 2D paint program. So I'd recommend Photoshop. It's sort of what everybody uses, but you know, Photoshop's not free, so if you're wanting to get into this, then just use any old painting program. You're just going to need to be able to paint black and white masks, essentially, like tiled noise textures, or, you know, a wave shape for like a shock wave, or anything like that, like all those sorts of things, like a star for a twinkling star, or a smoke particle, or anything like that you can paint. You know, technically you can build those inside of Houdini or whatever, but, you know, not every game is going for a realistic style, so quite often you actually have to paint your own textures. Another thing you can actually learn as a somewhat of a side grade is substance design, and that thing's looking pretty cool now, actually. I've been shown some sort of tricks you can do inside it, and it's already looking like a pretty promising program. I need to get into it myself, so I can't say much on the subject. I'm a newbie to that thing as well, so, but it looks like it's going to be great for creating noise maps in a very undestructive workflow, so could be great. And lastly, of course, and probably most important, right after 3D and Photoshop, would be a actual particle editor inside of a game engine. You're going to have a hard time making particle effects. God, why am I screwing up so much in this video? Particle effects when, you know, you don't know how to make particles inside of an engine. So obviously that would be my greatest advice. There's lots of tutorials out there on how to get started on the basics of the Unity particle editor. I think it's called Shuriken, and Cascade, which is Unreal's particle editor. It's the one I'm using for the videos because it's the one I know the most out of the engines out there you can use. But yeah, just learn the basics of that. There's seriously so many videos out there on how to model all the nodes inside those engines, like, and how they all work, how to create sparks and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, once you learn those other two fundamentals, just jump right into that. It's the best way to get started. And once you know that, then you can get started on the rest of these steps. Actually, the next step you can get started on right away too, but let's move on to that now. Alright, next up should be a fairly obvious one, but you need to play video games. Like seriously, if you want to work in visual effects, you are essentially the player's interaction with the game. If you make explosions that take, you know, a minute to go off and then the smoke lingers around on the screen and covers up the gameplay and you can't see anything, then you've essentially just made the game bad. So, it doesn't, you know, like, playing video games is a great way to see exactly, like, what stuff is really annoying. Like, oh man, when I'm running through the section and smoke is too thick, that sucks. It's really annoying. Oh, when that explosion goes off, you know, it felt like a soggy piece of cardboard. Like, that's not very good. You know, you want punchy effects so they feel powerful when you shoot that rocket launcher or, you know, shotgun or whatever like that. It's also great for just gathering up ideas and seeing how other effects artists build their effects, of course. There's just sort of endless benefits to it. It's essentially like living in your subject that you're going to be creating, and really, why get into game visual effects if you don't want to play games in the first place, you know? So, I feel like this is a pretty easy one, and, you know, I don't think like anybody's going to have a problem with this one. But, you know, I feel playing video games, if you want to get into gameplay stuff, is obviously very important. Alright, now, on actually getting started and doing this thing. So, of course, you're going to need those fundamentals, which I was talking about before. They're going to carry over onto all the stuff I'm talking about next, so, you know, if you don't know those yet, well, you give it a listen, but, you know, maybe it'll be good before you get started. So, obviously, you need to, right off the bat, you need to know a particle editor, so, here we go. Next bit now. So, another very, very important thing, especially lately, in visual effects, is learning the basic principles of animation. There's quite a few videos out there, like, YouTube channels going over it. I think Jason Kaiser did, like, a actual, he's done a tutorial series, almost, on talking over a lot of this sort of stuff. There was a GDC video by, Michael Lyndon? Michael? Mr. Lyndon, anyway. He did a great GDC talk on it. Sadly, I think it's only a slideshow that you can download, but whatever. And I've got another YouTuber guy here going over the principles of animation. It's essentially going over things like squash and stretch, and fast and slow, and things like that. This probably means a load of gibberish to you if you have not looked at these before. But essentially, it's talking about a lot of things of motion. What makes impact feel like impactful? What makes particles going outwards feel good? Like, what secondary motion, like, how do you fade out a thing and make it not feel janky and shit? How do you shift one object to another location and make it look speedy and not like a linear machine just moving across the screen? It's essentially going over just making your effects actually feel good and satisfying so the player, you know, actually wants to use them instead of it feeling bad. So, why I say this is so important is you can make your effects look absolutely amazing. Like, you could chuck the best materials on it, you could have the best textures, you could render out the top-of-the-line Houdini simulations. It doesn't matter. If your stuff looks great like that, but when you play it and it feels terrible, nobody cares. Like, if I'm shooting that shotgun, and it feels like, you know, a wet fart coming out of that end of that gun, it's like... nobody's going to want to play that. That is not fun. It, in fact, ruins the fun of the game. And it sounds really stupid saying this, but seriously, like, this is so important. Like, the feeling of your actual effects. The amount of games, seriously, that I've played where stuff just, I don't want to, like, the gameplay just feels bad, and most people will just be like, ugh, you know, I don't know what it is, but maybe the controls are bad, or something like that with the game. But quite a lot of the time it can be just, the effects are just not quite up to par, like, and it's not, like, a lot of the time they look beautiful, but that really does not matter when your effects feel bad. Feeling and input and everything like that, when I shoot a gun, I want it to feel good, you know, when an explosion goes off, that needs to feel punchy, I want to, you know, I want to feel it. This is super important for effects, so do not skip this effect. Like, seriously, I wish somebody had taught me this at the start, to look into animation fundamentals. When I was in 3D school, I kind of skipped over this stuff, like, animation, whatever, I don't need to do that stuff, and now I'm really regretting it, and I'm having to look over, you know, all this stuff in the future, and it's a lot harder once you're, you know, 28 and you're not sitting in school all day. So, make sure to look over that stuff, it's very important. Seriously. Make your games feel good. People will like them. Alright, next after you've sort of gone over these principles of animation, a great way to start applying them right off the bat is start mucking around in those particle editors that we've learned. So, you don't need any textures on those particles. I just advise trying to make your default billboard squares. Just make a blank square in a material and plug it into your particle emitter, and just muck around with that, like changing the size quickly, having a thing blow up quickly and it shrink down, or going out and slowing down, and really practicing that motion. If you can get square particles, like just square billboard particles, you can stretch them out, don't worry, like rectangles as well, any shape you want. If you can make those feel good, then when you finally get around to texturing them, then they're going to feel even better. That's the point. So, seriously, do not skip that last step. Like, I see it a lot. Don't do that. Just make sure your effects feel good, then go on to making them look good. You'll thank me later after you learn it. Like, everything will become a lot easier once you do this. You'll start, like, people will find your effects much cooler right off the bat, even if they don't look the most highest fidelity or anything like that. As long as they feel punchy, people will love it. They'll think whatever thing you've made feels really good. Yeah, and really the best way to practice that is just with square particles. So you can muck around with the alpha or anything. You can fade out particles. You can change the color of lifetime and everything. I advise just not moving on to texturing just yet, because seriously, like, you can fall down a bit of like a black hole with that sort of thing. Like, you could paint your textures amazing and then be like, oh, I don't get it. My effect it doesn't feel right still. And a lot of the time it is feeling, seriously. Like, so don't skip that step. Alright, there you go. You got something to practice anyway. Try create some like effects just from games, but just out of squares. I know it sounds stupid, but seriously, I reckon it'll really pay off in the long run. Alright, next up is, now you can move on to making your materials and textures and stuff. Now, materials, just a warning, they can be a freaking black hole on your effects. You can sit there and dive so deep into making a material, you can spend days on it. You can spend weeks or even months on working on a material, and your effects still won't be good. So do watch out for that. Like, seriously, there's a lot of stuff that, again, if you skip those last steps, you'll be wondering like, man, okay, maybe I can fix whatever this thing is inside my material. Or even worse, like, you'll start thinking of strange things of, actually, maybe I can combine multiple things together into one material, which sounds really cool, and it looks really cool in the Real Time VFX forum. But a lot of the time it can come out very inefficient, and it turns into a freaking nightmare to work with. Like, some of the things I've made, like, I just don't even want to look at. That I've put so much detail into them to the point where I don't even know where to look anymore. So just a warning, materials can be a nightmare if you make them too complex right off the bat. So, I've actually got somewhere to start with this sort of thing. So, a guy called, a very cool guy, called Mr. Julian Love, actually, put out, he's a guy over here at Blizzard, put out a tutorial on a technique called AM2X, I believe they call it. It's essentially, you use two different textures scrolling across one another with a mask in order to create very complex effects. It's very simple to set up. In fact, I'll put a tutorial on it, if you end up using that, guys, make sure to give me a like. And yeah, just give that a go. It's very easy for beginners. You can just start with a mask and a single scrolling texture. I really recommend that. Like, it's very basic and it works. Like, it seriously looks really good for how simple it is. I recommend doing that before you go diving down any crazy black holes. Like, do that before you get into like vertex animation and all this kind of crazy stuff. Like, that stuff looks really cool, but again, it looks great when it's like a looping thing on the spot, but you gotta learn the actual like things you'll be using a lot of the time when making a game first before you get into like the cool crazy like stuff flying all over the place stuff. You're learning the fundamentals of how to build effects. If you want to get started, this is what I recommend. And, alright, on to the last step. So, what have I got written down here for the last step? Oh, yes, okay. So, this is where the Maya comes in. Start learning, mucking around with, like, different stuff you can do with meshes. There's all sorts of different things you can do with meshes. You can shoot stuff outwards, like a shockwave, and create these kind of, like, weird things with, like, mucked up UVs. You can use spheres. You can use all, like, cylinders and all these different, like, kinds of weird shapes. People are constantly surprising me endlessly with all the different things they come up with. There's a whole lot you can do with meshes. But again, just like materials, they can turn into a bit of a black hole where you'll be endlessly trying to reinvent the wheel with some crazy mesh thing you're doing, when really you could create it in some other very simple way, and you're just trying to make it overly convoluted to feel cool. You know, I can associate, I do it all the time. So I'm just trying to warn you so you don't do it yourself. But yeah, meshes are absolutely freaking fantastic. They're great for optimizing games. I'm going to do a lot more tutorials on it. There's actually a few on the forums, like the Real Time VFX forums too. I think Shannon Burke, I think that's her name, that she's a League of Legends person. She goes over a lot of different like mesh techniques they use in their game too. So yeah, meshes are great. Again, don't jump on them until you know sort of the basic fundamentals. Alright. Alright, sorry for the odd cut there. I thought I had more points. Turns out I do not have more points. But that's good. We can cut this video here. So I'll just quickly do a quick conclusion of going over the basic steps. So first off, learn that 3D program. Just the very basic fundamentals. You need to know what a model is, and all the faces and vertices, all that sort of stuff, and how to UV unwrap. Any rigging you can bring to the table can always be used in games. You can create all kinds of different weird things from rigging, and it'll stop you from having to bug tech art and stuff like that in the future. You'll be a lot more independent. You won't have to rely on as many people to get stuff done. Basic understanding of Photoshop or any sort of paint program that you can export like tiled masks from, like creating procedural textures. Substance Designer is possibly another way to go. Maybe you can look into that. I am not super experienced in it. Learn a particle editor in an engine. Don't learn it in Maya or like Houdini or something like that. Those are all very cool for cinematics and stuff, but you know, if you want to get started with games, you need to know a game particle engine. Start with Unreal or Unity. They're the easiest ones that have got the most tutorials out there. I'm not sure if there's anything else out there yet, really. Play video games, that's an obvious one. Create particle effects with squares after you learn the fundamentals of animation. I'll put the links down below of some sources I found that you could watch on that. And what else we got here? Oh, build those square effects, like effects out of squares. That's what you're going to be doing next after that. And next, you can get into materials. But first, make sure you understand how all those like little sliders work in the particle editor before you start moving on to complex stuff like, you know, shaders and materials and all that sort of stuff. That stuff's cool. Again, black hole, watch out for them. They can go very deep. Very, very, very deep. They can go indefinitely deep. And lastly, then move on to meshes and stuff like that. Meshes and stuff are great, but again, much like materials, they can be a bit of a black hole. So watch out. But again, you can create many, many cool things with meshes. So they're the last one I'd recommend getting into. Yeah, so we'll just cut it off here, guys. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I'm just trying to get as little cuts in this as possible just so I can get this video out there. Yeah, anyway, I hope it was somewhat useful. If you guys have any questions or want me to expand on anything I talked about, I've been a bit quick on this one, or actually just maybe has rambled on too long, or maybe I haven't been straight to the point enough. So, either way, feedback's always great, guys. And, yeah, anything you got, feedback-wise, just let me know. Anyway, I'm rambling again. Alright, I'm gonna finish this right here. Alright, I'll catch you in another video.